people. Way too many. Many of us are actually, in fact, autistic. There are many people who today, after learning about many historical characters and their mannerisms, it's believed that many of these people were autistic themselves. A very specific type of autistic. It's called Asperger's. From Leonardo da Vinci to Nikola Tesla to Beethoven. That is correct, sirs. Also, might I add that Homer is another important one to add to that list. You can't stop us. So there was a little boy in Africa on the news. And it's because they didn't have any electricity where he was at. And what did he do? He built a generator. There was another little boy in Africa. They didn't have any water, filtered water where he was at. So what did he do? He built a water purification system. These are kids doing this. I had a lot of ideas as a kid. A lot of us did, didn't we? I designed some stuff a long time ago that I wanted to implement into a boat. Later on, the ideas that I came up with, they were my ideas. I came up with them on my own. And then other people built them. Now, of course, that if you make the wrong inferences, you might believe that I'm claiming that these people built my idea. That they had stolen it from me. They did build my idea. No, they did not steal it from me. They came to it the same conclusions that I did. Because the technology is here. You cannot stop innovation. You can't stop it. Especially when it comes to autistic folks. We're here to try to make the world a better place if you just shut up. If you'd stop assuming. If you'd actually listen. So there's this boat that I've been wanting to build. And of course, never had the money for. Never had the property even start. Got all the skills to be able to do it. But no place to build. I even got a bunch of crap on my car to show the concept. Now, some of these concepts I have revised down to their simplest or most efficient forms. But there was a little girl right here in the United States. Part of what I designed, a little girl in the United States here came up with a boat that is run off of a pinwheel. You know what a pinwheel is. So it's attached to this pinwheel, and the pinwheel has a gear on it, and that gear turns another gear, and that gear turns a shaft, and that shaft runs a propeller. Not only that, but she did it the way that, well, if you lived in Nebraska and had a wind vane on your barn, you know exactly what it is. It's basically she converted the pinwheel so that it would do the same thing as one of those farm things does when the wind blows. It'll point it so that the fan is directly into the wind. It'll point it so that the blades on they're actually water pumps, just so you know. Those old windmills that are out there that farmers use. It's a water pump. It pulls water out of a well. But on the back of it, it's got a tail. And that tail helps it so that when the wind goes through, it makes it so that, of course, you're getting the wind going through it at the best possible direction. And by putting it in the best possible direction to catch the wind, you're able to use even a little bit of wind. So this young woman, she figured out, now this part I didn't do. I didn't design this because I designed manned craft. I want to be able to live on my creations. If I'm going to build a boat, I want to be able to live on it. I don't want it to be a drone. But she made it so that she wanted her boat to always go upwind. I want you to imagine that. For a boat to always go upwind. It is powered by the wind, and it goes upwind. She can make it so that it will power itself almost any direction based on the wind, and it's mechanical. Now, I came up with the idea of a windmill as a power system to run a shaft. That I came up with on my own, and she came up with it on her own, independently. The reason for that is because we grew up in a generation where we have access to a lot more information, a lot more stuff at our fingertips, a lot more access for poor people to be able to read and write, and also a lot easier access for poor people to get their hands on what used to be one of the most expensive commodities on the planet, and that would be books. A book during certain periods of history was worth almost 3 times its weight in gold, I believe they said, but don't quote me on that because I'm not for certain. During the Middle Ages, scribes, the amount that a scribe was paid to write a book, that weight, after all the time that they spent writing that book, the weight in gold that they were paid did weigh more than the book, because it took a long time to write it by hand before the advent of the printing press. There's an idea that I had for a hydrogen power plant that literally gets its hydrogen from the water. It's produced as you need it. And, well, I designed a lot of different things like that. And today I was looking at a thing where there's some new boats. I love new boats. And the boat that I designed, although it's not exactly the way that I designed it, because these people had a little bit different routes, a little bit different construction methods, a little bit different stuff that they had access to. Instead of making a skin of the boat, since there's impact-resistant plastics that you can make the solar panels out of. Instead of making the shape of the boat with see-through plastic and then putting solar panels through it so that they're actually the shape of the boat, they made them so that the solar panels are on every flat surface of the boat. So that's different. But also the hydrogen production source that they designed, yes, very much based on my ideas. Also, the type of windmill that they used is also one of my ideas. And guess what? I didn't tell them my ideas. They came up with it on their own. Yes, I have on my YouTube page or my Facebook page, Trash to Treasure and Airplane Enthusiasts. Yes, I speak about those ideas. And I kind of show stuff that's similar so that people can kind of get the base idea, and hopefully somebody else builds it. When I throw those ideas out there, I am hoping for a race, because I don't have the fucking resources, but every time that you guys make one of these things, it validates everything that I have been treated like shit for my whole life. My ideas are shit. I'm an idiot because I'm intelligent, apparently. Intelligence sounds like lunacy to stupid people. So, of course, all these inventions and ideas that I had, most of them aren't inventions. It's just putting 2 and 2 together. Kind of like if you can make that concept to go together to make that boat work that way, like that little girl did. And of course, you can make a generator the way that that little boy in Africa did, and water purification the way that other boy in Africa did. Well, absolutely, you got something going for yourself. You throw that on a trimaran, you throw that thing up in the air so that it'll take you in the direction that you want to go, so you can take a nap and it'll still take you where you want to go. We've got a special windmill that, of course, it catches the wind and it attaches to a propeller shaft that goes into the water and sends you the direction you need to go. These are all things that people have actually created and built because they had the time and the money and, most importantly, the property You can make do with not having any money if you have the property, because you can do what I do. You take ideas from people around the world, and of course, people in rural areas. They have the cardboard boat races. That's in Alliance, Nebraska. The boats are literally made out of cardboard. So there was a guy at an air show in Boulder, Colorado, flew in a Cessna. And when he came in a Cessna, he was bragging to me that his Cessna was made out of over 90% cardboard, including the ribs on the inside of the wing, all of the coating over the airplane. The parts that were not metal was the engine and the important instrument panel pieces. And, of course, the gas tank was not made out of cardboard, and the paint was not cardboard. And the glue, of course, was not cardboard. But as far as volume goes, 90% of the airplane was made out of cardboard. You wouldn't think that would even be legal. And he got the idea from airplane kits as a child and, of course, watching a cardboard boat race. I wonder if that cardboard boat race was in Alliance, Nebraska. I didn't ask him. At the point where he was telling me the story, I didn't know that they had such a thing in Alliance, Nebraska. Matter of fact, the guy who was telling me the story about his airplane, I was half thinking he was full of it, because I was like, all right, cardboard may float, but you're not going to fucking get a paddle and get into a cardboard box and paddle yourself across the lake. It's just not going to happen. You're going to fall through the box. It's going to get waterlogged, and you better fucking swim. Hope you don't get stuck in your box, because it might drown you. You just can't stop us, can you? Thomas Edison tried to stop Nikola Tesla, and then, of course, Tesla was proven to be right. And Edison's bullshit that cost us a lot of money and resources and was inefficient. Edison's crap was torn down across the entire country and replaced with whose electricity? Nikola Tesla. There are a lot of homeless people out here who are autistic. There's a lot of people who have exactly the same idea. They're going to get some property, and they're going to have a safe place for them and theirs. And then every step of the way through our lives, we're cut off from that. We're told it's just a pipe dream. People will literally sabotage our efforts because they think it's a waste of time. In reality, they don't want us to succeed. I'm autistic, so I must be retarded. And because autistic people must be retarded according to our society, it's entirely wrong. We're not retarded. But because people assume that I'm retarded, they assume that, oh, there's no way that an autistic person could do something like Nikola Tesla did, or like Leonardo da Vinci, or Homer, or Heron of Alexandria, one of the most famous men that you guys have never heard of. Or if you did, you didn't pay attention. Now, if I could figure out where the hell I put my keys, I'd have driven out of here already. Anyway, to see inventions that I came up with actually come out as a product. Like when I was telling that guy at product development in Cabela's Corporate, when I used to scrub toilets and all that. When I told him about my idea for a cot tent. They made one. And it's a backpack cot tent like I had the idea of, exactly. Except that theirs was not a bifold, it's a trifold. And also, it doesn't have an actual backpack attached to it. So when I redesigned it, because they didn't exactly do what I wanted, I redesigned it so that it would be better than theirs, and so that I could just flip the goddamn thing upside down and use it as a fucking kayak. Throw on some ribbing, a little bit of structural supports on the exterior of your waterproofing. That way, if you run into stuff, it'll run into that instead of your waterproofing material. Make it impact resistant so that, and movable, so if you run into a big rock, big jagged thing, Instead of it tearing a hole in the side, your water resistant material moves, gets out of the fucking way. But of course, if somebody else comes out with it first, if somebody else builds a bifold backpack tent, that all you have to do is literally unlatch it and it's already folded out. It'll fold out on its own just because you unlatched it. That you can fit on your back. That you can take the two middle legs on the cot and fold them down independently and use that cot when you need to rest. You can use those two middle legs on the cot, bend them down, bend your knees, and actually use your legs as the front legs and the cot tent middle legs on it as the back legs, and sit down as if you're in a chair. Take an actual load off right then and there. If you guys can make it quicker than me, fucking I'm down with seeing it. I want to see how you would do it. Just like these people coming out with ideas and concepts that I came up with years ago. I love seeing how they do it, how they would do it differently, how they had to overcome some of the issues that I had. You know, some of the issues that I thought about. And then, of course, when I'm looking at their designs, I'm thinking to myself, well, I could have done it better. Everybody who builds and designs stuff thinks they can do it better. Every construction worker thinks he's a better construction worker. Every architect thinks he's better than every other fucking architect. But in reality, if we work together, we get something out of it, don't we? You can't stop us from having ideas. You can't stop us. The ideas that I have voiced and told people about, like that cot tent that I told Cabela's about, and they actually made one. They actually made one. You can see it in their products catalog, although it's Bass Pro now. Bass Pro Shops. They actually started in the back of their parents' furniture store in Chapel, Nebraska. That's right. Chapel would not expand their post office for more mail, which is why they moved to Sidney, Nebraska. And Cabela's is what made Sidney, Nebraska, what it is. Now, where the fuck are my keys? Alright, folks, it's looking like I'm going to have to go check in the bathroom and see if I left them in there. Maybe I dropped them on the floor. A lot of times they'll fall out of the ignition. My vehicle can drive without the keys in the ignition. You just need the keys to start it. And you need the keys to turn it off. So many a time when I've been running my vehicle, I've had to allow it to run while it's burning up because the keys fell out, and I'm trying to figure out where I took them out and misplaced them, because a lot of times I will take them out so that I don't have to deal with trying to reach down between my legs while I'm driving trying to find my keys. I'll just leave them there, and then when I stop, of course, I'm looking for where I set them, and they're on the floor. But if I do pick them up, or I do set them somewhere, then of course, I forget that I set them somewhere, and I end up checking on the floor first, and spending 20 or 30 minutes doing that, checking under the seats, because I don't want to go through this massive fucking pile. If one little thing falls into the pile, it falls in between the stuff and the seats, and it's something little, my telephone, I got to move everything to try to find whether it fell over by the door, whether it fell over here by the glove compartment, or whether it fell between this bag full of clothing and the seat. Anyway, it is wonderful to see that even if my ideas never come to fruition, someone else is going to think of it too, and they'll come up with it, and they'll make it, and they'll show that you guys are fucking idiots for telling me how wrong I was to want to do these things myself, how it wasn't possible, about how you couldn't do it, about how a hydrogen production system on the ocean that runs on salt water would never work, because if it worked, then all these billions of dollars that the government spent had wasted. That, of course, the government must be right, because they have the biggest and the brightest. Well, they have people who are good with numbers, but their imaginations are shit. Aaron of Alexandria, Nikola Tesla, very smart men, very autistic. Leonardo da Vinci as well, Homer as well, highly intelligent, strange and odd. Let's make sure that we plug this in, and you don't have to see my face while I'm talking. So, of course, anything that's not plugged in and charging, we can... Oh, that one's plugged into something. That one's plugged in. That one's plugged in. That's 3 out of 4. Which one is this one attached to? Alright, this is the one. We've got all these people throughout history, and of course Albert Einstein. I mean, if you guys want to argue and claim that he wasn't autistic, you're going to lose. You're going to lose. All of these people, even the ones who are mathematicians, like Tesla and Einstein, said that the imagination is more important than the math. Every one of them. The imagination. All of these men who are considered to be autistic, likely to have high-functioning autism, which at one point in time was known as Asperger's. Some of the most intelligent men throughout history. Albert Einstein, when asked by a reporter what it felt like to be the smartest man in the world, he said, "I don't know, you'll have to ask Nikola Tesla." This is a world-renowned mathematician who was involved in the Manhattan Project. Considered the greatest physicist of all time, and of his time for certain. You can't stop us from changing the world. It's just horrible that so many of you use our minds towards your own destructive and selfish means and ends. Anyway, I'm going to an area where, obviously, no matter where I go in town, I am likely to run into Molly. If I stay somewhere for a couple of days, she is likely to start showing up there. I'm glad that I didn't see her at the feed today. I made sure that I got early, and got the fuck out of there. I didn't eat there. I didn't get friendly with people after I got my food. I got the fuck out. The stuff that I have to endure, nobody should have to endure. But I'm also not the only one enduring it. When I ask people to share my story and to speak up, I'm not asking them to do anything that I would not do for them. When I asked for Ogre to speak up, I had spoken up for him. When I asked John Fox to speak up, I had spoken up for him. When I asked Mandy Singer to speak up, I had spoken up for her. When I asked my sister to speak up, I had spoken up for her. I had spoken up for so many people. And many of those people, the only reason me speaking up didn't do any difference is because, well, they'd already given up. They'd already been beaten into submission. They'd already jumped through all the hoops that they were told to jump through. And then loopholes were used to abuse them for jumping through them goddamn hoops. Anyway, I used the bathroom. My vehicle is at least running. It's functional. Fuck it. I don't need a goddamn cigarette, although I am thankful to that dude for giving me nearly an entire pack. No, he gave me the whole pack. He was gonna give me the other one, but... Ah, fuck. God damn, that fucking hurts. I can move my shoulder now. That's one of the things that I was not able to do before. I was not able to move my shoulder. It just hurt too damn much. And that's why I took up blacksmithing. And because of blacksmithing, I was able to free up my shoulder so that I could actually move it, even though it hurts like hell. There's a lot of innovations that I see that are great and wonderful ideas, and there's other ones that I'm surprised they have not done yet. Like, of course, ejecting the entire cockpit. Now, the Russians actually did quasi mess around with an ejectable cockpit, but the problem is stabilization in flight after being ejected. I mean, basically, the reason for having an ejectable cockpit is because at high speeds, you want that canopy there to break the wind and stop it from literally tearing your body apart. At over 1,000 miles, or at over 700 miles an hour, yeah, it's going to tear pieces off of you. Anything Mach speeds is going to tear your body apart, just the sheer wind force. So if you're able to eject the entire cockpit, well, then you can prevent them from being torn apart like that. But the other issue is, if you can't stabilize it immediately, or better yet, prevent it from becoming unstable immediately, then you can prevent the G-forces that happen when you rapidly become a tumbling object. You can prevent that. And I came up with the idea of how to do that based on the idea of the parachutes on drag car racing, combined with the idea of folding Kleenex in a box, so one of them pulls out and it pulls out the next one, and it's all about the same amount of tension that you have to use to pull each one out. And since they're coming out, if you've got something that's grabbing the air immediately, well, you can use that at the rear end of the vehicle to act as immediate drag, to keep the front end pointed forward, the rear end pointed rearward, and to slow you down a little bit at a time by basically one parachute at a time, slowing you down about 200 pounds of pressure. Now, I haven't done the math on it, but the concept is solid. It's just a matter of utilizing the right materials and doing the right math, because if you slow it down too much, the G-forces that the pilot will experience slowing down that fast, especially when strapped in, unless their helmet is strapped in as well, it'll break their fucking neck. Break their neck forward, which is a very scary way to do it. So when you're designing stuff for saving lives, you got to have a pretty good understanding of the human body and how it moves. I learn about a lot of stuff because I'm interested in a lot of stuff. Anyway, I'm going to park at this parking lot down here because I don't get messed with in it. And because there's a possibility I might... Oh, I don't have to do that anymore, do I? I started that as a routine because my phone was off and I couldn't call these people, but now I can. So, with the education that we have at our fingertips, especially now with the internet, when I came up with a lot of these concepts, there was no fucking internet, no such thing. What there was a lot of time by myself with no friends except for my books. And I never got into fiction, ever. but I did like the Bible. I did like a few fictional books, like um, Hatchet by Gary Paulson. I'd say that's the first quasi-adult book that I ever read, but really that's only because it was the only one I ever got recognition for. Man, you're only 7 years old and you read Hatchet by Gary Paulson? Shit, I'd already read the whole Bible by that point. I didn't understand all the words. I didn't know the meanings of all the words, but I'd read the book. All right, so you know how we end these videos. I am in an area where I have seen Molly, but I'm hoping that this late at night, especially with the fog, that I won't have any issues with her coming up and giving me any sort of problems. Also, I'm not going to stay in this parking lot all night because I'll get messed with. And I might go over to Fred Meyer's to see if a couple of the folks over there that are good to me are getting off. Well, it's actually time to go see. Perhaps I should have just headed over there first. I've had a lot of people that I told my ideas that told me I was stupid, that it'd never work. And then later on, they told me, hey, man, I had a great idea. And then they spat back at me something that was my idea. Or somebody else comes up with it on their own. And then this person sees it and goes, hey, man, why didn't you ever come up with something like this? Well, I did. I told you about it. You didn't listen. Yes, I sat down and took the time to read about these things and learn about them and even to test it out. And since I didn't have the money for a $10,000 fucking set of engineering modeling kits, I used garbage. Let's just test it out and see if it works. Rest assuredly, as long as I don't have to junk it together too bad, it'll work. There are times where I needed a frame to be entirely rigid, and I didn't have enough rope or string to actually secure it so that it was rigid. And of course, my idea, although it was a great idea, did not work out because I did not have the right or proper materials or quantity of materials. If I'd had the proper materials, then I wouldn't have needed a greater quantity of the other materials, and vice versa. But as y'all know, we make do with what we got. We live and we learn. A lot of times when there's something that I'm afraid is going to have a structural failure, it does have a structural failure where I thought it would. A lot of the stuff that I designed, it's an imagination thing, but you think that would be a great idea, but you have to go beyond that. You have to learn the physics. You have to learn the dynamics, the different materials and possible ways of achieving something. If somebody tells you it's impossible, figure a way for it not to be. If you use triangulation when you're trying to make a hovering vehicle, especially if you're making the flow through the vehicle instead of external, like on a helicopter, a flow through a vehicle, that would be like a Harrier jump jet. It sucks air in through the inlets, and then it goes through the fuselage, and it is ejected out of ports along the fuselage and, of course, the rear of the vehicle. That's one way to do it. With a helicopter, you've got, of course, the rotor, and it's around the vehicle. It is pushing the air down, first of all, on the vehicle itself, but also around the vehicle as well. And when you have that happen, you also create a suction underneath the vehicle that also has to be overcome. And sometimes that suction during certain maneuvers becomes a bit of buoyancy. And this is all really cool stuff to learn about. Then when you start learning about it, there's other stuff you might think of, like, oh, if I did this, 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 and this on a helicopter, I could make it so I could make some real high-speed banks. Do a real quick 360. But then when you look at the helicopter maneuvering, you learn about two very important things. One of those, and you might believe that I'm crazy for calling it this, one of them is a special part on a helicopter called the Jesus nut. It's at the very top of the rotor mast. And if it comes loose, you better be right with the Jesus. So it was properly named. The other one is known as mast bumping. You have to kind of control the flow of the rotors over your vehicle and not try to do any real quick tanking maneuvers. Because if you do that, you're going to have too much rock in your vehicle versus the rotors, and you're actually going to create a structural weak point by having a lot of pressure all at once smack into your mast while rotating. And of course, then it doesn't matter that you've got a Jesus nut. The Jesus nut doesn't make any difference. It doesn't have to come loose. It's attached to a part of your helicopter that you need for keeping you in the air, and you just broke that whole fucking piece off. So when I found out about mast bumping, I actually had to throw away a couple of my designs. Anyway, the exciting one that I'm hoping somebody will come out with is I'm hoping that they'll take a helicopter rotor. Let's say we'll do it for a OH6, an OH6 Loach. You take the Rolls-Royce 250, formerly the Allison 250 engine that goes in the OH6, you take it out and throw it away. You take off the rotor and you throw it away. You take out the transmission and you throw it away. You put a thick mast that's hollow, and that's for a lot of your control surfaces to go through, just like it, well, similarly is supposed to do. Now, instead of replacing the engine and replacing the rotor and replacing the transmission, you're taking the transmission out entirely. You're taking the engine out entirely. What you do is you make your rotors so that at the very tip of the rotor you have an air inlet. The further out it is from the center, the more air it's going to get into it, the faster it's going to travel, and the more it's going to compress. And you need compression for combustion. Now what you do is you make it go through a series of baffles based on the Tesla air turbine, or the Tesla valve, the one-way Tesla valve. And you have a center tube in that is your exhaust tube. It's going to have a lot of heat. Those baffles go right past that. So all of the air that you're forcing in to the very tip of your rotor, on the leading edge, on the very outside of it, away from the mast, the part furthest away from the mast. So as it is traveling forward in motion, it is forcing air into it. It is forcing it around the exhaust system into the center hub where it is ignited. And when it is ignited in the center hub, it is forced out. As it is forced out through the exhaust system, where it goes through the entire rotor, which will prevent ice from getting stuck to your rotor, creating a lot of issues. Also, that exhaust, since it's not touching the incoming air, the heat from it will be transferred to the air that is coming in, that is going to the center hub. By heating it up, you increase its chances of igniting, and you make it easier for it to combust. And also, because of the nature of the one-way Tesla valves, you get a lot more compression. Also, you prevent your exhaust from getting too hot and melting down. As the exhaust goes through there, and you might want to look up Jay Leno's jet car. He's got two of them. One of them is by Chrysler. This is the one that you're going to want to look at. The information about that car in the video will explain all of the things that I'm telling you about. And like I'm explaining to you about innovation, it's already been created. I'm not telling you something that you can't look up and see for yourself. There are famous people who own, well, as far as I know, Jay Leno is the only person who owns an actual running Chrysler jet car, but the heat exchange is important. Now, also, that prevents you from having to have the engine and the transmission. And of course, by taking out the tail rotor, you got to do something to compensate for that, don't you? Well, I'd still have a tail rotor. I would just turn it in a different direction. I'd want it to be facing straight backwards, and you wouldn't need to do that. If you've ever heard of the Hiller Hornet. The Hiller Hornet is a very cool aircraft. Very cool. And the issues of the Hiller Hornet are easily overcome by, instead of attaching something like it's a quasi-ramjet. It's half ramjet and it's half pulse jet. And if we, instead of having it be a ramjet or a pulse jet, we have it be that exhaust pushing out of the rear of the propeller. It's pushing out of the trailing edge of the rotor on the outside edge, the furthest away from the mast. So as that exhaust is pushing out the back, it is propelling the rotor forward, and the forward momentum of the rotor forces air into it. The one-way Tesla air valves make it so that it can't back out. And of course, you have turned your rotor into the engine and the transmission. And if you put one on top of the other and put a simple gear between the two on either side of the mast, or possibly three of them to optimize stabilization, well, it's going a lot slower speed at the center where the mast is. And as a result, that one little gear wouldn't even need to be lubricated. Now, I'm sure you've heard that before with horrible creatures such as the AR-15 M16. Yes, that absolutely needs to be oiled, but you're also talking about something that is, because it's got oil in it, it's going to collect dust and a lot of debris and stuff like that and increase the wear and tear. And if you've got something that can have a high degree of lift with a low quantity of travel at the center mast, then yes, you can actually put in a gear that is meant for slow speeds, and something that's meant for slow speeds, especially if you have rounded or cambered gears, you can prevent it from having all of that wear and tear and not have to have a lubrication system on it. And we've also seen that with the Teflon rotor system that was actually designed by Hughes Rotorcraft. When we start learning about the Bell 209, which later on we got to see the variants of it that turned into the Bell UA or AH-1G Cobra. That's what that project ended up turning into. And of course, that Teflon rotor system was also designed specifically for the OH-6 helicopter, the one that I was telling you about. They didn't use that, of course, on the production of the AH-1G Cobra, because it was designed to use the rotor off of the UH-1 Cobra, so that most of the parts were interchangeable. If over in Vietnam they had some Cobras that got a lot of damage in them to the tail rotor, they could literally take the tail rotor off of, or the tail boom. That's the entire tail section on it. If a tail boom was destroyed, they could take the tail boom off of a UH-1 and put it on there. If they had problems with, the thing is that the majority of the parts for the AH-1G Cobra were UH-1 Huey parts. I haven't, for the most part, designed anything new. A lot of the stuff that I've designed is taking ancient technology and putting it together. And taking modern knowledge and the fact that I have access to books written by Plato. I didn't have to figure it out myself. I can go down to the library and read his stuff. Although that's philosophy and it's not necessarily correct. Philosophy is a pseudoscience, just so you know. I love philosophy, but still it is not a true science. Alright, you know how we end these videos? I want to thank that young woman who created that boat, because it was just a little model just to show her concept. It was less than a foot long, and it was less than a foot tall, but it worked. I want to thank that little girl for inventing that. I want to thank those two young men whose villages in Africa resulted in, first of all, clean water, and second of all, electricity. And I want to thank all of the Nikolai Teslas and all of the Albert Einsteins and all of the Leonardo da Vinci's and all of the Homers of the world. I want to thank you guys for existing. Just because you're autistic doesn't mean that you're wrong. Just because you have an imagination doesn't make you dumb. It doesn't make you delusional. It doesn't make you stupid. The smartest, most intelligent minds of our time were like us. And don't let the world tell you otherwise. You can't stop us. There was a guy in a video game I used to play. His name in the game was Autism Saved My Life. And he used to say, autistic people see the world for what it is. Good to be rid of you. Thanks for coming to visit. Stay out of trouble or don't get caught. Remember, you are your brother's keeper and no victim left behind. Be ever vigilant.